Welcome to the Preferred Lies third podcast episode. This show is designed to bring the world of golf course rankings to the 21st century. My name is Pat Forbes, and I'm your host. Today, we have Ian Andrew on the show. Ian is the consulting architect for TPC Toronto. He's also worked with many of the best golf courses across Canada and in the Northeast US. Today, we cover the work being completed at Canada's new home of golf, TPC Toronto. We also cover Ian's stance on golf course rankings, along with a review of his personal top 15 in Canada and some of his favorite holes in the country. Not only does he discuss heavy hitters such as Banff, Jasper, Highlands, St. G's, but it also covers lesser known such as Beaumaris Yacht Club, Pine Ridge, Edmonton, Norfolk, and more. Lastly, Ian shares his hope for the future of Canadian golf. Did you know this is the fifth project we've worked on together? So we've done Cherry Hill, Lookout, Oakdale, and St. G's at this point. And
I guess I never counted St. George's. Yeah.
So this is number 5. So we figured it was time for you to rank some of your courses and just, generally speaking, talk about how you view Canadian golf.
Yeah, I gave you 15. I think after that, I'll be fairly frank, after that, it sort of, if you are from further away, they would be sort of the places I'd steer you. After that, it's a pick 'em. You can pick from 50 different golf courses, and there's different reasons for it, like a Victoria. Worth playing Victoria, but it's not a great golf course. Worth playing Colwood, but it's not a great golf course. There's a whole bunch of things, even some of the stuff in the Muskoka area. I've said to everybody, you should go play Muskoka golf, but I'm going to tell you right now, there's nothing where you're going to go, oh my God, that's probably in the top 100. There's nothing up there that's even in that context. That there are better holes down here, but the problem is there's no golf courses where there's 14 or 15 of them.
So let's unpack that a little bit. And so for you, what's the definition of a great golf course?
Something unique. So when you get there, it sets itself apart. So whether it's the landscape of Highlands Links or let's say I think the routing's pretty clever at St. George's, but I think the bunkering at St. George's probably kind of stands out if you're picking for something. So it has to have something that sort of contextually and in a broader context does actually stand out, that it's worth coming to see. And then it needs to have a body of work. It's like a good example is I can send you to Northumberland Links and you will play one of my probably 10 most favorite par 3s. But really, is there much else there? Mm-hmm. Put it this way, Kawartha is a good example, even though it doesn't get the attention, but there's a lot of interesting architecture there that makes it an almost. So I remember Tom asked me for a list of places to go to. And the first time I sent him to Westmount, St. Thomas, and somewhere else. It might have been Burlington or wherever it was. And he just said, and he came off of not fond of any of them. And it was like, okay, that's fine. And so the next time I said, I'm going to send you to 3 more obscure ones, but I'm hoping this is kind of more in the wheelhouse. So I sent him to Lookout, Kawartha, and Cataraqui. Believe it or not, I actually sent him on a trip that involved all 3.
Okay. And
he came back and said, yes, that was awesome. That's perfect. And it was like, okay, that's what I was trying to figure out.
Well, in Southern Ontario, you have these options to play around with, and it's what is your taste, whether it's Travis or Stanley,
To me, Lookout's not perfect, but Lookout stands head and shoulders for interesting above most. Cherry Hill has to levitate purely on greens.
So I want to keep diving in to your journey, your lie, as we call it at TPL. Before we do that, so we're sitting here at TPC Toronto. For those who aren't familiar with the project or the announcement, is it almost a year ago now?
Winter, so it was November, I think.
So for those who aren't familiar with the announcement of TPC Toronto, what can you share about this project, both big picture and then on the golf course proper?
Okay. I guess it's important to say that I actually worked on it with Doug originally, and it's Doug's golf course, and it will always be Doug's golf course as far as I'm concerned. What we're looking at doing is just trying to update everything. So part of it is where people are driving the ball, the way people are playing. Things are a little out of context. So this is an opportunity to put things in context. So just talking for regular play. The facility's holding a lot more events. And so with holding more events, it's always been the golf course that sets up probably best for a tournament. And so it's the one where they're a lot more flexible on length. Heathlands is kind of at its limitations. Nothing needs to happen on the Heathlands. I think Doug did an amazing job. I think the way Dave maintains it, I think it's spectacular. It holds its own beautifully, but I think probably over the long run that you'll see a little bit of work around the south as well to sort of update some of the detailing more than anything else. I think, again, the design was great by Doug. I think it'll be more about day-to-day maintenance. But the north was the one where it's really wide. It needed to narrow. But while it's long, it needed things to move into a better position. Even someone like myself playing for my set of tees, there were spots where you could just hit by things. And we're trying to get it so that you have to work your way around the trouble again, which is how it worked originally when it was built. So the key is just trying to get things to play a little better, make a little more decisions. If you're really good, have to hit it closer to the trouble a lot more. And that's the big one. If there was sort of a takeaway, you want players to have to take on some of the trouble to try and score a little lower. And I think that's what we've tried to do.
Are there holes that stand out on the north when you look at the plans in terms of narrowing that are going to be impacted more so than others? Are there like 2 or 3 holes that you want to talk about? So 13, we changed sort of the context of what you're dealing with. It used to be a hole built around bunkers, and now it's built around a big fescue hill, which was the original design that was going to happen, and then sort of decisions were made in the field to not go that route. So when I entertained that with Chris, we decided to go back to that original idea that was the concept for that hole. But I would say the 5th, you've kind of got to fit the ball in now, which you didn't have to. It was big enough, and the bunkering was far enough away and close enough that you sort of had this wide swath in between. And now we're trying to make you decide whether you're going to go over the left bunker or you're going to try to turn it off of the right bunkers. And I think what we're trying to do is put everything in uncomfortable spots. There was a great line for the Braid's bunker on Nairn that the bunker is exactly where you want to be, and it's why it was always such a famous bunker. It's also deep and everything else, but I think we're trying to do the same, is to, if we could stick things where you want to be, that's going to make you make more decisions. And we don't want to tell you what to do. We just want to have you make more decisions and more choices. Bunkers on 15, they're a little tighter than they used to be. They're also now in the landing area in particular. If you're playing from the one by the green, really is impacted by the shorter tees. Interestingly enough, we're going to end up with a longer tee that we're going to play with the idea of going short and long in that hole. And the other bunker will definitely come into play on, because the corner gets a little hard to carry, which means you've got to go left of the tree. And that bunker, because we've moved it way in, is going to be definitely in play because everything's kicking towards it. So there's 2 holes where it stands out. But even the 18th, the bunkering is actually sliding along to represent where the new carry is. So with the tees going back, the bunkers are moving along, and now that carry becomes all or nothing. Got it.
Rather than at the moment, if in the current tees, there are a lot of players who could just take it clear over without thinking about it.
What's the new carry going to be on 18?
I think the far carry, I'm guessing, I wish I had the numbers in front of me, but I'm guessing, but I think it's probably somewhere around 310, 320 on the fly.
Okay.
And that's one of the things we sort of, yes, players hit at 340, but it's what's on the fly actually matters. You're trying to work to that a little bit.
Based on pin location, how are you hugging the corner of a bunker?
Well, one of the things that works really well is we're not really monkeying around too much with the stuff at the greens. I actually think Doug's angles and everything else, what we're trying to do is get the angles off the tee to work with the angles at the greens. So there's more of, do I take this on because that opens that up? So I'm tightening up the 6 in particular because it's kind of wide and it's drivable. It definitely is drivable. And we're going to add a bunker closer to the green too. But everything comes in on that one just to even make the layup a little bit more awkward. Because if the layup's more awkward, then they're going to go more. Yeah. Because if they just find the layup's a little frustrating at a certain point, it's like, well, it, I'm going to hit a driver instead. And that makes it a lot more active hole on people trying to push a little bit more. And we would like to see them try to take chances on 6. So funny enough, by tightening up the layup, it encourages going a little bit further.
That's it's funny how logical some design elements can be. It's just they're linear decision making.
But the funny part is you can put together a puzzle, and in your mind you have a way you hope they're going to solve the puzzle, and then you'll watch play for a while and realize that either they're not into your little maze that you tried to create for them. They're either going to eliminate the stuff that they don't want to do. Yeah. Good example is at St. George's, the 12th, everybody laid up on the 12th. And they just took all the risk out of either being caught in the bunkers or getting into a bad location on the approach. So some good players sometimes just will think it down to why bother, or percentages. I give them credit. It's percentages. They just figure out all the percentages and they play to it. But then sometimes you put something in place and people get caught up in your little mind game that you're trying to play or your little puzzle. And they're actually things you hope they would try and things you hope that they would conceive or even utilize if you've given them something to work with. When you watch a player actually use the clues or use the opportunities you've given them, it is kind of really rewarding. But if you think you're going to do that 18 times, you're kidding yourself. You're going to get them interested in ideas some of the times, and some of the times they're going to say, nope, I'm just going to do that. And you're going to go, 12th at Laval, I gave you a lower and an upper fairway. And you got a good look from the upper fairway. And they're like, nope, like the lower fairway. I just can visualize it off the tee. I'm going there every time. And you don't want to go up there at all. And it's like, nope. And it's like, okay, I thought it would be a 50-50, and I cannot get people to go 50-50.
It's, I think, there are a lot of great golf courses that you've got on your line that I think the examples will surface in this conversation about some of those games. And as I think about, for me, what makes such a great golf hole is like when my mind is racing while I'm still standing over the ball and I've pulled the trigger and my mind is still racing. That to me makes an amazing golf hole or golf shot. You can have a great golf shot on an average golf hole.
I think when you commit to something, you're playing a hole and you commit to something and you get over the ball and you turn and say to the person you're playing with, this is probably not the right idea. And yet you settle over the ball, you sort of get your mind set to play it. And you never, that little nugget never, that's why caddies have to say that to their players sometimes of, okay, just give it a full, if that's our plan, let's just give it a full swing. But there are holes that do that too. You never actually can settle over the shot, whether it's sort of the 10th at Riviera. It doesn't matter what you choose. Even if you choose a layup, you're never quite, the layup, the funny part is the layup there is actually to the left rough. But how the hell do you convince yourself to play to the left rough intentionally to take out all the bad numbers?
Yeah, and left rough, we were there in February. That green is so narrow. Yeah. That mouth is like 8 to 12 yards wide max going into it. And So, and there's this grade that is fairly severe. So laying up in the left rough at like, more than 40 yards is still tricky. It's like, and there's bushes at 40 yards.
Well, the one thing, the left rough, like if you, and I'm talking like left rough, like way left of that bunker that's out there that people try to get close to. But if you can get far enough left and you don't care if you go in the rough, you get it to 100 yards. And you get it to 100 yards, at least it's a free full swing. Yeah. And you're not trying to delicate something in, because trying to hit something 50 yards into that green, you're going to get to the top and all the thoughts are going to start to spin, and you're either going to go fast, slow, decelerate, or you're going to lay it over. You're going to do something because it's just too much to convince yourself to be consistent, at least with a full swing. Because I remember I played with, his name was Norm Caparta. He was one of the original golf panelists, and I played with him there. And he said, if you can bring yourself, and it's funny, Mike Weird said the same thing. If you bring yourself to actually try to almost miss the fairway, to be that left, that's the secret sauce to the hole. That it's probably the one spot you can have and so you even want to kind of hit it through the fairway too. And the rest there is not that bad. So not for non-tournament. And so it worked out.
We were one there in 2003.
Yeah, in 2004.
Yeah. So it's a guy you can listen to, I guess, when it comes to
and then after telling me you should never hit driver, after walking around with him Tuesday and Wednesday, it was 208 or 209, he had driver on 6 to open up his round and made an instant double.
Nice.
So, and he told me never hit driver no matter what.
So, okay. So I want to get into, because we are kind of at the new home of Canadian golf to a certain extent, I do want to get into what your hope is for Canadian golf. But before we do that, you've built your lie. There are a ton of maybe less obvious choices that you've got on here, which shows your golf IQ and your experience, I guess. It's a polite way of saying that you're old. But yeah,
I am old. I have no bones about that.
But I want to kind of acknowledge some of them, just because we won't get to all of them. But I saw Edmonton on here. I saw Pine Ridge on here. I saw Waskesiu on here. I saw Norfolk here in Simcoe, Ontario.
Love Norfolk.
So there's some pretty cool places in addition to the traditional Highlands, Banff, Jasper, which we've got to talk about because we're just getting back from there. But I think as a starting point, you can walk us through your lie, Ian's lie, which we've got on here. You've got St. G's first, Highlands, Jasper, Banff Springs, Hamilton, Toronto, Capilano, Westmount, Cabot Links, the Paintbrush. I'm going to walk through 11 to 15 as well because you're 15th. I've got a photo from the Ontario Am last year that I want to share with you. But 11 to 15 is the Nash, Cataraqui, Lookout Point, Maple Downs, and Scarborough. So,
okay,
how long did it take for you to formulate this opinion, or do you know this with certainty?
I've thought about it. I used to be a lot more into sort of rankings and lists, and if I was at home and not trying to do it on the phone, I could have actually called up my favorite 25 holes, which is somewhere on the computer, and I could have called up sort of the very last ranking I did of the top 50. I kept it just to 15 because I was trying to think of just 15 places that my viewpoint of what's the best in Canadian golf are, what are the 15 places I would send you to play? Mm-hmm. So I kind of take that route. The only thing that kind of is a bit of a letdown, which your list helped me out on, was that doesn't touch any hidden gems or maybe there's a place with a couple of holes you just have to see, like Northumberland Links, where the golf experience is great. I'm not telling you you're going there for great golf, but you will enjoy your day. And I would highly recommend playing that. What I kind of wanted to do was just sort of, I'll always kind of lean on history. So I probably avoid maybe some of my peers a little too much, or I'll avoid my own work usually, whether it's my opinion that I like it or not. So it's sort of more of where I would send you to go and try things out.
There's a few things on just generally speaking your lie that I want to talk about, and then we can dive into some specifics. So I'll start with the obvious, just because we're coming back from Jasper and Banff, and we also played Waterton Lakes. I know you're in touch with Alex at Lob, and I'm curious to pick your brain. Have you played Waterton Lakes? Okay. Let's start with just Jasper and Banff. My take on those two places are they're insanely different golf experiences, despite the fact that in a magazine they look roughly similar before you get there. I could not believe the scale of Banff Springs, and I could not believe the story that Jasper Park Lodge tells. And so they're slotted 3 and 4 on your list of top 15 in Canada. How do you speak to somebody who hasn't played those two? How do you describe Jasper and Banff?
So Jasper, I'm going to do it chronologically because that actually answers the whole question. Jasper was the first time he tried to build on a mammoth scale. And if you look at the original images, the features were on a very grand scale, but the detailing was not. And so it is a spectacular routing in a wonderful valley that's surrounded by mountains. So one of the joys of it is the views. So he overcleared, which is the same technique he used for Banff, identified the views, found great green sites, produced a wonderful golf course that was lacking in details. Went to work for Banff, and when he was doing Banff, he clearly had sort of, as he was doing other work, he'd sort of had this understanding that what was missing at Jasper. Because sometimes when you do work, you sort of backtrack and you kind of go, I kind of wish I did a little bit more movement. Maybe I was a little too plain. I did that this morning, by the way. And so at Jasper, at Banff, he started to do a little bit more human detail. So a little bit more in the forms. And I think I'm making a little bit of an assumption here, but I think as he was doing that, I think he started experimenting with more and more. And I know the story I got from Jeff Cornish was they were on a train trip, and Cornish told me that Stan had said that he was inspired by the mountain peaks, and he either picked the snow of the glaciers or he picked the tops of the peaks. He used the peaks to make the mounting forms, something he did at a number of places as well. Or he used the glacier forms to establish what the sand lines would be, the flash sand lines. But at Jasper, everything kind of rose up in a broad form. But at Banff, he climbed all the way up those forms, and they were a lot more severe. But the other thing I think he'd figured out was if he had these huge corridors and he'd wound things back and forth between the bunker placement. But I think he started to play a little bit more with stronger angles, and he got things to swing further. But he got things to pinch in, and then all of a sudden you got a lot more of a test of golf, and where you had to either take the trouble on. At Jasper, you can kind of play avoidance. At Banff, you've kind of got to pick your lines. And so it's a lot sterner test of golf, like dramatically sterner test of golf. And you think about this is literally a year apart. And when he got done, obviously it's a visual feast. And even Banff, we know now, is actually way toned down from what it once was. If you look at the really early photos, it was mind-blowingly complicated, the bunkering. He was asked to go back to Jasper because obviously CN was disappointed that they were one-upped. Then he went back and he renovated. So what you've got to understand is he built noses and forms within the context. He didn't reshape bunkers too often. They're the same bunkers, but what he did was he established all the elaborate noses and flashes within the context of those original forms. And the plan exists. You can actually go look at the plan that instructs the men on what to do. So I find with Jasper, you've got more space. You're not pinched on play. You've got more opportunity to sort of freelance a little bit. And the bunkers are a little bit more open scaled. So while it's got some of the style, it doesn't have sort of the severity of form or the height. Banff is a lot more three-dimensional. Jasper's a little more It has some three-dimensional features, but it's a little more set down. And because of that, that's the different feeling between the two is you're dealing with all those pinching lines that are going on at Banff. And the fascinating part for me is, he does this and then he actually goes more back to Jasper on how he organized St. George's. And St. George's follows Jasper, Banff, Jasper, St. George's. It just all lines up. The interesting thing is the supervisor that was on Banff actually ends up at St. George's and ends up being the superintendent. So you've got actually a crossover of people involved as well.
So I guess, one of the things that stood out for me at Jasper, and I've got it as 2 in Canada for myself, and Banff is just behind. So you've got Jasper's 3 and Banff just behind.
I'll be honest, I can play pick 'em out of the top 3. I actually see Jasper and Banff different. I see that as a draw.
Yeah.
If you gave me one final round to play in the world, not Canada, in the world, I'd actually choose Jasper Park. I think Jasper Park is my favorite golf course. I've always looked at when you're asked to rank golf courses, I always look at architectural quality. Yeah. I think St. George's is a better golf course, and I happen to think that Highlands is the ultimate Canadian journey because it's a whole geology lesson, geography lesson. There's more than meets the eye to Highlands. That there may be better holes collectively at St. George's, but the emotional experience and the journey and the walks between holes are just as important as the holes. Highlands is special, but it has issues that it deals with that are really hard to ignore. And part of that is just they've always had issues with presenting the golf course as well as it should be presented. The fortunate part for me is I played Highlands 32 times, I think. And I've caught it brown and dry, and it just tells me that if it was drained properly, it would be a whole different experience.
Well, so we're talking about 2, and I want to focus a decent chunk of time on some of the lesser known. So I kind of want to wrap up on, I guess the 4 that we're talking about. But I think as I think about 2 of the courses that we're talking about right now, Highlands Links and Jasper Park Lodge, I think those 2 have the best story or best journey from start to finish in Canadian golf.
Did you get a chance to play Banff in order? It makes a huge difference.
In like original order?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, everybody should somehow. I don't understand why they don't have a sort of a Stanley Thompson day. Like, how can they not do this?
Like teeing off from 15?
You tee off from 15. They just close the other 9. And if you go out from 15 and you play around, it particularly the finish of, I'll always call it 16, 17, 18, but 16th is the best hole in the golf course by far. But 18 is not far off. I love the Cauldron. Cauldron's probably the best par 3 in Canada, but it's not my favorite hole at Banff Springs. It's actually what I would know as the old 16th, which would now be 11? 12, thanks.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I always talk about the holes in order because to me, that's the way it is. But that is the best hole in that golf course. And so, but you get that at the end when you're ready for it and you're coming down the stretch. And then nothing beats the swinging back and forth on 18 with the Banff Springs Hotel looming over you. But the same thing with just standing on the first tee, feeling all the air rush, see the mountains and the difference, the spray river. It is river. Spray River right below you. And it is actually a wider fairway than it looks. But that's a rush to hit off of that cold. So I've got to do that. So
I need to do that too, because the whole time I'm playing Banff, I'm thinking, this is the best course I've played in Canada. Of course, we played Jasper the next day. But it was, the last 3 holes, 16, 17, 18. 16 is a great hole, but 17, 18 to finish there with the road coming in. Yeah, I'd be curious to see if I felt
it's a different emotional response and also where everything occurs. So you think about the Cauldron comes later.
Yeah, for sure. And the finish, you just described it.
Which matters. It matters that it come later because you're ready for that swing. Yeah. So you're now the 8th hole. You're usually freshest between, the kinks are out by 4 or 5 for most people. So 7 is a reachable 5 that you've got to kind of make a decision on. But then you've got 8, and then you start into some of the longer 4s, which is nice. And then you've got opportunity. And then as you're coming home, you've got to grind a little bit. You're well warmed up. It's, do you have the legs to kind of get yourself home? Because you're now starting to run into old 15, 16 or back-to-back bears. And then, of course, current 10, I guess it's known as.
Or so 220.
Yeah. So you think about that. You're getting that all in times where you're probably better prepared. And if you've got a round going, you've got a little skin in the game too. Yeah.
Well, and what I loved about Jasper was it felt like there were 3 main sections of the golf course. Like, so 2, Caveat was in brutal condition when we played it. I loved it still. Like just the natural feeling of this sort of half pipe, and then you have the old man in the distance. And 3 is such a good golf hole. So 2, 3, 4, that stretch, I absolutely love. And you got it, like you have a totally different section of the property, 7, 8, 9. It's like you're now in the mountains, and Clio is a ridiculous golf hole. It is so good.
Yep.
And then like 13 to 18.
And it's hard to convince yourself to hit it as short as you actually should hit it, too.
I know. Well, you get a number and it's like, what was it, 231. And then it's like slope adjusted, you're looking at 197. But then you're like, you're in Alberta, you're at elevation. I really just need like a 180 shot here when the number says 231.
And there's a good feeder slope. If you can find that bowl, it will feed it down. You may not get it on the green, but being in the front of the green is just fine. But the first time I played it, I actually played 30 yards short intentionally, got it exactly where I wanted to go and found it on the front of the green. And it was just I like holes that you can solve different ways. And I like anything that allows you to be creative. I know for me, criticism that I have taken is that I like Redans too much. But the reason I like Redans too much, the reason I like Cleopatra so much is if you give people the ability to use the ground game and show their creativity.
Yeah. Just because I know we've got a bit of a following in Belleville, Kingston area. You've got Cataraqui listed at number 12 here.
Yep.
What are the words that come to mind when you hear Cat?
It's funny. I've always talked about the 5 Thompson courses, which Capilano, I don't think we've mentioned. We've mentioned the others as the 5 best works that he did. They stand out. They clearly stand out. And there's always been kind of a debate on whether some of the others, if restored, like Montebello is a good example, would they be the 6? But for me, it's clear cut, no question. My 6 has always been Cataraqui. I think Cataraqui has better details, more interesting holes. It has one of the best collections of 3s you'll find in Canada. Other than maybe Jasper Park, I'm trying to think of anywhere else that's in that sort of quality level. The interesting thing is one of them's actually an original hole from the old routing played sideways. 8th is actually the old green.
8 is so good.
Yeah, but it works. He made that work. He actually kept the green.
Do you think their signature hole is the worst of the 3s? 12?
Oh, I didn't think that's their signature hole. I do agree. It's the least interesting of the 3s.
Like 2 and 15
I'm a huge fan of 2 because I think 2 is the one that doesn't get the credit. But it's a really clever uphill 3. But 15 is the sort of the home run of the group. Just the audacity to sort of take everything up to a grade and then stick the green up again just a bit and then create that edge where if you're not perfect, you're not on. But all of them are good. I think 12, I kind of wish it didn't have a pond more than anything else. I do like the expansive bunkers, but it's just a drop shot hole. Yeah.
Okay. So that's good on Cat. I did want to show you. So on Scarborough, this is, and you've got Scarborough listed as 15. So when we look at your favorite 4s, you've got St. G's.
Scarborough by far is the best short par 4 in Canada. It's not even close.
I'm going to pull up the Ontario AM yardage guide for the 7th green site just to show the grade. But if you had to guess, like what grade percentages are on that green, from back to front, where does your head go?
4.5.
On average?
Yeah.
Okay. And at its steepest, what do you think?
8.
Okay.
Maybe 9. Actually, there's a section in the front, maybe 9. 8. But even the pins in the back they're pinning 4.5 because they have no choice. There really isn't much there to work with. No. Interesting. Didn't realize it was that much.
Isn't that crazy? So yeah, you've got your 3 in the back and then obviously 10 points. So you're not pinning anything less than
They're
5.
they're pinning the 4/8 in the middle. You can pin 5. It's super uncomfortable.
Yeah.
They pin 4.5 in the Canadian Open because 16 really doesn't have a lot of choices.
This year
or 2 years ago, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. As long as it sits somewhere they can work with. It was one of the back pins they used. I was surprised they used it. The slot's 3.5 the whole way, which is up the right by the bunker, but they used one of the upper pins.
So as we go through this, we've got on your favorite holes, we've got 3s. We've talked about them already. You've obviously mentioned the Cauldron and Clio. I know you're fond of Uplands.
Uplands is, if you remove the trees, it might even go to 2 or 1. Uplands is the best public hole you can play. Period. It is just such an epic shot. It's a little bit hemmed in, but what a par 3. One of the better ones he ever did too. It's way over the top, which makes it spectacular.
Laval-sur-le-Lac, haven't been there, hope to one day. 3rd hole.
Oh, yeah. That's being selfish. That's just me picking the best thing I think I ever did in the way of a par 3 in all the years I've worked. I really do think it's a good hole. It was based around the par 3s that I had seen in Melbourne, Australia. So cool. It's got the sort of the crowny nature kind of sliding off the sides with the big aggressive bunkering in front. So you go 2 easy holes and then it's just one where it says hit your very best because only your very best is going to work out. And it's just that moment of, all right, you've had a gentle handshake, step up or pay the price. And the golf course goes like that. The whole golf course is based around that whole idea of here's the opportunity, now here's survive this. And so the golf course is supposed to be, it's my attempt at trying to give you a roller coaster of emotions. The idea of really hard, really gettable, but just taking you up and down. And I've actually tried to, and the spacing gets wider, so you get you may go back and forth, but it's not alternate holes. I've tried to then 2 or 3 holes and then 3 or 4 holes. And the idea is just trying to move up and down the emotions on different. So I was very into the whole roller coaster idea I watched a program on roller coaster design, and they talked about you can't just do 3 barrel roll, like a barrel roll followed by a loop followed by a twist. If you do that, you actually just make people sick.
Right.
And the whole key to roller coaster design is you take them to a thrill, and you actually have to slow the heart rate down to a point, not completely, but to a point that they're ready for the next thrill. And we're talking seconds, and they work within, because it's expensive. Every second of a roller coaster is expensive. So they've got it down to sort of half second or second increments. And they know when they design, say they're doing a loop. Loop's fine, but you need to have sort of something that settles you down. But you have to have time before, if you're going to do a barrel roll, or coming out of a barrel roll, for example, needs more time. And it was just the idea of, well, golf design should be the sort of same idea. If you want somebody to be excited about what you're doing, sometimes the best thing you can do is one hole in advance of something you want them to really pay attention to is to lay off the gas and give them something that's, maybe it's a wide open fairway, or maybe it's a free shot, or maybe it's just an easier hole. And then you give them sort of all the sauce that you want at that point so that you can impress them. But if you really want to impress somebody, it's showmanship. If you really want to impress somebody, don't sing and dance for 12 songs in a row. Mix it up a little bit, space it out a little bit, maybe tell a joke in between. If you can get the rhythms up and down in golf, you'll actually get more engagement. Yeah. So so I got myself in trouble. It cost me a job, interestingly enough. That's a story. I wrote about, I thought Trent Jones' whole idea of every hole should be a hard par and an easy bogey. That to me, that's flatline, and flatline equates to death, really. But I think it mentally equates to disengagement. But if you think about a heartbeat, high and low, that's engagement. And so I talked about that. And interestingly, people at the club were offended that I was working at a Trent Jones course. I used that analogy. They thought I didn't like Trent Jones. And I was just making a point about golf needs rhythms, and actually Trent designs in rhythms. And it's just, but if you take that as a principle, it's a bad principle. That he did better work than that, but it's a way of devolving golf design by trying to make everything consistent. Yet greens committees, if you work with greens committees, the grandest failure of greens committees, they want to make the easy hole harder and they want to make the hard hole easier. And essentially, if they get their way to its logical conclusion, you end up with disengagement.
So things I learned today. Ian Andrew is a legendary golf course architect. He's also a future roller coaster designer.
I wish.
Okay, so I'm going to scroll through this list, read them all out loud, and you're going to pick 3 that you want to talk about. So we've gone through best par 3s. On best closers, we've got JPL number 1. Capilano is your second favorite. Edmonton Country Club, 18th hole, is your third favorite closing hole in Canada. Kataraqui, 18th hole, is your fourth favorite. On hardest holes, we've got Pine Ridge, 9th hole, the par 3. Highlands Links, the 7th hole, par 5, is a beast. The Paintbrush, hole 13, par 3, also a beast. Shaughnessy, the 10th hole, par 4. Nobleton Lakes, 4th hole, par 4. These are your hardest holes in the country. On par 5s, we've got...
Do you want me to jump in and just do it before we go through that?
Sure, yeah. Pick the one that you want to talk about here.
So I'm going to go a little out of the box. I'm going to pick the 10th at Shaughnessy.
Yeah.
And one of the most underappreciated things is when land and greens don't match. And so that if things are sliding on you, it's really hard to hit shots. And so it's just a really good example where you'll look at it and it's what you don't see. It's the fact that the land doesn't go with what you're trying to do, and it's subtly fighting. And because of that, it's just really hard to hit each of the shots. So it's not a hole that's going to stand out as visually stunning. It's not a hole that's going to be obvious architecturally, but it's all about the fact that if you work with a fairway slope, for example, that's going to the right, let's just to make an example. If you need to hold the slope, you're going to have to hit a draw. But what's more important is if you need to hit an approach, if the green's going to the right, you can set yourself up in the left edge and you can let the land just dictate where the ball goes and it will slide in that direction. But if you move the green going the opposite way, the ball wants to slide right, but you need to actually turn the ball left. That's when you've got everything's working against a precise shot. And the level of difficulty doesn't appear to be triple, but it is. And that's why I think Shaughnessy's hole is special.
So on your list of favorite 5s, you've got Highland Links, 15th hole, Capilano, the 18th hole, St. G's, the 11th hole, St. Thomas, number 8, and then TPC Toronto, the 18th hole.
Yeah, I think Doug created an impressive carry angle with some of the deepest fairway bunkers you'll find anywhere. And so the fun when you get to that tee shot is I'm a lefty. I'm trying to draw it over the corner, but it's a case of if you can get away with one, you now have the option to go. If you don't, the price of going into those bunkers is awful. And by playing way wide, it even makes laying up hard. So it kind of rewards trying to be a little overly aggressive. So kudos to Doug for setting that up. So let's say you've managed to catch the corner, which means you've caught the downslope, which means you've now got into the throw up distance, I like to call it, where you can definitely get home, but it's all or nothing. And that's the joy of it. The way it works out is there's an easy layup. You can see it. It is the logical thing to do. But you can get there. You're downhill. You can see everything. You can see the pond in front. And because the green's below you, all you've got to do is hit it just precise. And I love that because it's on an angle to you.
And it's going to create the drama.
Yeah, it's just pure drama. Even the tee shot was pure drama. It's just drama followed by drama. And what a great way to finish a round. You could have played terrible all day, but if you absolutely stripe one there, and if you can stripe the next one, everything's forgotten. And it's the whole entire time in the pub afterwards, or in the clubhouse to be built really soon, all you're going to talk about is those two shots. Yep. And in fact, you're going to be obnoxious. You're going to talk about that for the next 6 weeks with your friends.
We've got a few other categories to get through. So best closers, you've got JPL, Capilano, Edmonton, Cataraqui.
I'll speak to Edmonton on the whole idea of a par 3 as a finisher. So one of the things I really like about Edmonton's finisher it's sort of, as I've spent more time around it, I've sort of loved it more and more, is that it kind of reminds me of Pasatiempo's finisher, that you'd think having a 3 as a closer would be a letdown because it's a single shot. But if the single shot is truly all-world spectacular, it is a single shot with all sorts of potential to it, whether it's 2 or 5 or whatever the number is going to be. What I love about Edmonton's is it's a slightly downhill par 3. It has the single best bridge in Canada, one of the best bridges in golf, in the suspension bridge that they've got at the side, which is part of the charm. The ravine is over 100 feet deep. I think it's like 110 feet deep. So it's an all-world canyon that you just got to carry it. And then what I like about the hole is it's surrounded by bunkers, pure Thompson. It's got small back bunkers, some really elaborate front bunkers, and then it's got a low shelf, a big tier, and then an upper shelf, which means you've got to be so precise to be on that right spot to try and to squeeze a 2 out of it. But I just love the fact that it's sort of an epic finish. And again, you may have played a little bit of a rough 9 or maybe even a rough 18, but you can come there and you can make all the bad go away with one swing.
Awesome.
So,
I've not played it, but I've seen a ton of photos, and it looks.
He uses it as advertisements, so we've got that one done. I can show you quickly, I think. No, I just turned it off. No, I'll show you later.
Okay. I want to wrap up talking about 2 of these other categories. So your green sites and your gems. I'm happy to talk about a couple on gems, but so on green sites, you've got Cherry Hills 18th, which
I'll talk about that one because that is the single best green in Canada.
You got Highlands Links, the second hole, bunkerless hole for those who've played it. Cotton Fields number 14, Victoria number 7. Depending on the routing, I think you're probably referring to the green site around the water. Yeah. The crazy split in that green site, and then Oshawa Golf Club. You want to talk about Cherry Hills 18th green site?
Yeah, I would prefer to. I do think Cherry Hills 18th is the best green in Canada. It's one of those greens that I wish I built that. It's got so much movement in the green in general, and then it may have the single greatest pin position I've ever seen, the upper left pin position. It's got all sorts of horror stories, right down to the Canadian Open when they hosted. I know on a personal level, one of the funniest things I ever had happen to me was I hit the green in 2 playing in a Travis Cup, and I made 7. And it was because it was an upper pin, and I could not get the ball to stay up there. So it was just sort of one of those ones where I thought it was very funny at the time. But it's just level of interior contour that makes that special. There's not a lot of great greens with interior contour in Canada. So it's one of the few that's really overwhelmingly good.
Yeah. We're down to our last widget. So your hidden gems, your favorite holes on hidden gem golf courses. You've got the 7th at Owen Sound as your favorite. Waskesiu's 8th hole par 5. Ashburn and Halifax is your third, specifically the third hole. The 4th at Northumberland Links is number 4 on your list.
Yeah.
And then Beaumaris in Bracebridge, the second hole there, par 4, is rounding out your favorite hidden gem holes. So I don't know if you want to talk about all of these, a couple of them. Which ones jump out for you?
All right. So on my hidden gems, one of the great Stanley Thompson short fours in Canada is at Owen Sound. And it's very short, very reachable, and it all comes down. It's proof that a green site and a green site alone can be a massive conundrum. It's tiny. It is one of the steeper green sites I've ever seen, and it runs at an angle that, unless you place your drive absolutely pitch perfect, you're probably going to miss it on your second, even though the hole, I don't even think the hole's more than about 275 yards. Mm. But it's one of those holes where you could drive it and easily make 2, but I could see making the worst 6 from right around the green site and just not being able to contend with it. I always just thought it was it's a combination of the slope of the land and the angle of the green, and then the steepness of the green, and the fact that it's really hard to get into. You could just be 10 feet off line and it becomes awkward. You have to absolutely be on a string to make the hole just sort of unlock, and everything after that is difficult. And I couldn't even imagine hitting the ball by it. If you hit the ball by it, all bets are off. But it's just, it's not even complicated in the things that are there. It's actually a very simple hole. But it's one of those holes where you go, how did I make 6 as you leave? Waskesiu's 8th. It's just the landforms. Waskesiu is a place everybody should play. If I was to give everybody an odd out-of-the-box experience, I would say go play Waskesiu. Don't expect it to make perfect sense, and go into it with a sense of humor. Too many blind shots that you wonder why they're blind shots, and they're awkward things, but just keep paying attention to the fact that green sites are really great. And they're worth all the weird blind shots and the fact you go. But the 8th is the one hole where everything's right in front of you and you get massive elevation change. And these huge fairway contours, and you end up at one point playing between 2 really massive hills, and you play up kind of a chute in between. It's just a really fun hole to play. It plays more straightforward than the others. That's why people really like it. But it's unusual to find that much contour in fairways other than maybe Highland Links. Mm. That's why I'd always say you should play Highland Links just for the fairway contours. Mm. The 3rd hole at Old Ashburn is severely uphill. It's not 100 feet, but it's probably about 80. You hit into a landing area that has a rise of 40 feet in it, in the contour of the fairway. It is really difficult to find a place to play to. It is a masterclass in designing a par 4 in really severe land that works. And every decision that Stanley made, the green, the way he tucked the green into a bowl, it's the only place that the hole would have worked from. It's a beautiful bowl green site, and it makes everything else work. You've got to really pick your spots and how to play it, but it's playable because of all the choices that he made. So the angle of the tee shot, the where the fairway sits on the land. The fairway could have gone left or right, but it wouldn't have played quite the same. And then this, one of the best bowl green sites you'll find anywhere, justifies going up severely. Northumberland Links, we talked about. It's just a great epic par 3 right on the ocean. How many holes do you get to play in the ocean? And it's public golf, and this one's a really good one. For $50 or less, yes. And you can say hi to Anne Murray as she curses you for holding her up because you're playing too slow. And then finally, Beaumaris' second is my favorite hole in the Muskokas. And I picked that just because nobody seems to have ever played it or heard it. It is a really charming golf course. It's well below par 70. It's the original golf course up there. It's got a lot of great holes, not just one or two. It's got some weird holes, but it's got some really, truly great holes. If I was to suggest a cottage course to get what cottage golf is supposed to be, there are other places like the Windermere's of the world, and then some of the Club Link stuff up there. They're really great golf. Muskoka Bay, if you want something really hard, but for cottage golf, go play Beaumaris.
I've got to check it out. We don't have a ton of time in Ontario this summer, but
it's one of those where half of it you'll go, and then half of it you're going to go, holy shit, this is really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like 1890s golf, and it has crossovers in the whole bit.
That's cool. Okay, so we're going to wrap up. We've talked a lot about Canadian golf, generally speaking, some of the big heavy hitters that a lot of people know about, some of the subtle ones that maybe you're educating me about, and maybe some of our listeners and viewers, you're giving them the next tip for where to check out on the weekend. I think we've covered, if my memory's not serving me incorrectly, Nova Scotia, Quebec, Ontario, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and British Columbia in this podcast. So hopefully a lot of the country's covered.
Well, if we can throw Manitoba in there, I would say Pine Ridge's opening hole may be the most complicated short hole and one of the best openers in Canada.
Which is Donald Ross, if I'm not mistaken.
Donald Ross, and I would highly recommend. And the ninth is the single hardest hole in Canada for trying to make your par. I would highly recommend people seek that out.
Okay.
The Ross work that's there is exceptional. There's a lot of other work there too, so you're going to hit moments that you're not sure about, but you'll know when you hit the Ross holes, and they're truly great.
So I guess let's wrap up on that note. Knowing that this is truly a Canadian discussion and a Canadian podcast, I want to wrap up talking to you a little bit about what your hope or your vision is for Canadian golf in the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And no better place to do it than at Canada's current home of golf, TPC Toronto.
I think I hope me personally, I hope we find the next Stanley Thompson. I think we've had some really interesting young people enter the golf industry in the last little while that have a lot of capability and it's funny, a lot of people lament the generations that follow, but I always think the generations that follow are a little smarter and a little better read and a little better researched than we are. I think that's just inevitable. I think everything's generally progress. I'm just sort of hopeful that one or two of them emerge to sort of give us the next set of Stanley Thompson courses, because I do think, you look at the top of my list and it's a lot of Stanley Thompson, and I think we need somebody to be the next Stan for us to sort of kind of lead us forward and have not only influence here, but a little bit of influence beyond here. So if I'm hopeful for one thing, it would be for somebody of the next generation to just sort of explode as a creative mind. And, if I was to criticize Canadian golf, I think we're hiring a little bit too much international. I know it sounds like I'm looking after myself. That's not the intent. I would like to see the next generation get the opportunities. Like I was lucky. I got to work with not necessarily the top sort of tier of golf courses, but the mid-tier of golf courses. I was given that opportunity to hopefully do some really good work, but also there was a learning curve in there. I'll confess to that. But I hope the next generation gets those opportunities, and then that's where you're going to get the next Stanley Thompson. I mean, Stanley wasn't, if you ask me when Stanley was great, I would say Stanley was clearly good. There was no question right from the beginning, but he was not great till 26, 27. He was not, a friend of mine jokingly referred to it as, or he said to me, "You mean Stanley effing Thompson?" And I said, "Yeah, I guess I've said that before." But he became that spectacular mind that just then had the incredible run that followed. But he had to, there was 40 golf courses in that spell leading into Jasper Banff. And so I'm hopeful that we get a little bit of a development boom that gives people some opportunities to show who they are, and then they get to do the restorations, renovations. The renovations in particular be really useful. Yeah. I think even some of my era could use a little bit of renovation work as well, some new ideas. I'm not sort of attached to whatever I leave behind is magical. I think whether it's my work or Doug or Tom or Graham Cook or Les Ferber or any of the people who are much busier than me, I think at some point that needs to be sort of revisited. And then I'm just hopeful that, as I said, there's a Stan or a Jane that sort of steps out from the others, and then we get sort of that magical run of 10 golf courses worthy of talking in the top 25 sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, let's keep an eye out for the next generation. Appreciate you joining us today and sharing your perspective and, quite frankly, educating all of us on places we should be checking out. So thank you.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap. Episode 3 of the Preferred Lie podcast is officially in the books. Thank you, Ian, for sharing your perspective on Canadian golf and TPC Toronto. You can find Ian's full list of Canadian rankings on preferredlie.com. If you haven't already, sign up for an account and get ranking. With your help and your opinion, we believe we can fix this broken golf course ranking space.